This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. I've had the opportunity to really talk to some interesting people over the years. I mean, some real characters. And some of the characters have helped me to understand and learn more about trend following than perhaps some of the more, let's say, less characters. And my second book on the Turtles was a hell of a story. I mean, that book is very complete, very tight, got a ton of information. But I couldn't put every last table scrap in the book. HarperCollins at the time, they wanted it to be somewhat tight and not as long as I would have made it, not as much color as I would have put into it. And one of the great characters that I had the chance to talk to for that book was a guy named Mike Shannon. Mike was an original Turtle. He was in the second class that Richard Dennis and Bill Eckhardt taught. And I've not listened to Mike's interview for a few years. And I decided, I want to start to get some of this content that I have that's timeless to get it out so people can listen to it. And Mike's, my conversation with Mike is my first stab at finding some of this great timeless archival information that I've assembled and putting it out there for the public. So I'm going to go ahead and let you listen to this. I think you're going to enjoy this. And the turtle story, if you don't know it, my second book, it's going to cost you like $12. The Complete TurtleTrader. Read it. But Mike was one of the ones that really helped to be the connective tissue. He helped to truly make the story come alive. Because look, this was one secretive group of folks that did not want to talk until I showed up and made people talk. Held a figurative gun to their head and said, talk. Let's put this story out there. And Mike really helped to do that. And when I talked to him, he was living in Australia at the time. Now, unfortunately, Mike is no longer with us. He's deceased. And sadly, but his words live on. And I think you're really going to enjoy this, because when it comes to believing that anybody can truly take a shot at it and have success, Mike Shannon demonstrates that. Now, after Mike's interview that I'm going to play, I'm also talking with one of my former students, a guy named Jim Byers. And I think you're going to really enjoy that too, because Jim is truly an example of somebody who is that you're going to be able to relate to. Working in corporate America, typical 401k account, and then boom, the 07-08 time period after 20 years of trusting mutual funds blows up. And so I hope you really enjoy these two. I think this is going to be really interesting. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mike Shannon. The first question I'd want to ask you was, how did you find out about it? How did you end up applying? I mean,
that's a great story. I hope you got your tape recorder on. I was working as a broker, and I was a very, very bad commodities broker. And I mean, I was really, really bad. I was working for a company called Gill and Duffus. They no longer exist. I think they were absorbed by Collins Commodities, and Collins was absorbed by, I don't even remember. Anyway, some of the floor brokers had come up to my office after the pits closed, and we got to talking, and they found out about the first-year Turtle program, and they were all like keen to apply, and of course none of them did. And I made a phony resume, and I sent it off to Richard Bennett, and he sent me back a test in the mail, and I think there were 5,000 applicants. I think this is according to Dale DeLutri and Bill Eckhardt. And So I got this test back in the mail, and I'm reading it, and I have no clue of how to answer these questions successfully. So I just kind of put it aside for a while. And then a friend of mine, who at the time was a writer for the Associated Press, suggested we go to the Chicago Tribune and go down to the morgue and look up everything we could on Richard Dennis. And wouldn't you know it, over 90% of the answers to the questions on the test were in those articles. So I filled out the test, sent it in, and did a little background on Richard. My offices were in the Chicago Board of CBOE Annex behind Richard Dennis's office at 141 Jackson. So I got an interview with him, and I knew that he didn't like to wear shoes. He hates suits and all that, so I just wore a beat-up old sport coat, pair of jeans, a pair of top-siders with no socks, and just a regular sports shirt. Went in, and he and I had a meeting, and it turns out we had one thing in common. We like to play games like Risk and some of the Avalon Hill military games. And we talked about it, and we talked a little bit about salary, which was pretty nominal at the time. And I thought, yeah, maybe I have a shot, maybe I don't. And much to my surprise and delight, 2 weeks later, I get a call from Dale DeLutrick telling me I'm one of the Turtles.
And you were the first class.
So I basically lied myself into the job. Huh?
You were the first class, right?
Second.
You were second class, okay.
Yeah, I was at the second group. Yeah, I know Richard knows all this. I actually, a couple of years later, we were he used to throw these lavish Christmas parties, and I took him aside and I said, my resume was just made of whole cloth. In fact, I quit school when I was 16 years old. Although I mentioned I had college on my resume, and he thought it was pretty humorous because I did perform very well for him.
Yeah.
Which only goes to show you don't need a PhD from Harvard to be a turtle.
Well, I talked to Mike Cavallo, and he had his Harvard MBA, and he was kind of surprised that he got hired.
Yeah, Richard actually preferred people that had little or no finance background because you deal with guys like he was with the CIA. Michael Carr was a games designer. In fact, he was one of the designers of Dungeons and Dragons of all things.
Well, I hope you just
Anthony was.
I hope you just sent it out because I had a long conversation with Earl, and he never mentioned that he worked for the CIA.
Yeah, he generally kind of keeps that close to his chest, but he's also and he did some insurgency work, and he was kind of vague about it. But
no, I'll probably leave the CIA part out, but.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
But, we just came from so many different backgrounds. The only people I know that came up off the floor were Brian Proctor and Jimmy DiMaria.
Yeah.
I think everybody else was just kind of hired from outside.
Yeah, so, that was... the next thing you know, it was that quick. Just boom, boom. You're sitting here, you did some research, you found out about Rich, you submitted the answers in, but you weren't putting in a great amount of time to get through this whole process, and then you just got hired. Is that kind of what happened?
That's pretty much it. At the end of the day, I did pretty extensive research on Richard Dennis and Bill Eckhardt. Mm-hmm. Just to find out where their head was, so at least I'd be on some kind of a level playing field. Perhaps not intellectually, but certainly understanding them as people and stuff. And I think that was rather key. And I got the word. I think it was the end of October, early November, that I got the job, and I started 2 weeks before Christmas for the training, which lasted all of 2 weeks. Then we took a Christmas break, and then started. I think the end of the first week of January. And the rest of the day is history.
What do you, I've made a couple notes here just on things to ask, but I'm curious if you're, I've probably seen most of the research. I probably went through the same process you did. So I've seen, the old New York Times prints of the Pitt articles and a lot of those old Chicago articles. So I've had a chance to get a good feel for Rich behind the scenes too. But what, if you were to give me your nutshell takeaway as of Rich and Bill as people and how you perceive them and your takeaways. I'm sitting back here as kind of like a third party person, just admiring kind of what they figured out. And I'm just curious as to your view on it.
Well, you have to understand, Rich, he started trading, and he was so young when he started as a soybean trader that he had to send his father into the pits to execute his trades for him because he just simply wasn't old enough. And I kind of like that because he was like, I was 16, I think, when he started trading, 16, 17, something like that. And he started trading with all the money he saved up from delivering pizzas, of all things. And I found Rich is, he's reclusive, but he's affable. We were never really great friends, but he was never really great friends with any of the turtles. Bill Eckhardt, on the other hand, was infinitely more accessible, and I spent a lot of time with Bill socially, and used to go out to his house on occasion and stuff, and I found Bill to be a hyper intellectual, but again, not being lofty about it, for lack of a better explanation. He was very accessible and always keen to answer any questions you might have about anything relating to the methodology. Everything from risk to getting in, getting out, and there were just so many subtle nuances that he had, and I delighted in picking his brain on it.
Mike, do you look back and have any memorable moments of either interaction during the time that you were, in the program, and any color that you might want to add? I mean, I should tell you this: in terms of interviews, you will be the last turtle that I speak with. You'll be my second to last interview. My last interview, actually, for this book, and you might chuckle at this, you might not see the connection, and you might have to wait for the book to come out to see the connection. But my last interview for this book is going to be Boone Pickens.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Boone Pickens.
Yeah.
I love the company. I've always wanted to meet him. I've always found him a remarkable, very sharp-minded individual. Wow, that's really interesting. As far as anecdotal stuff, let's see. When we first got there, Richard had leased a large office and set up cubicles for us to work in. And in there, we also had our own ping pong table, video games, and all that other stuff. There was a lot of downtime because we're trend followers. I mean, we'd go days and stuff without trading. And but there was no dress code, and it was that particular office was sandwiched between two floors in the insurance exchange building of this insurance company. I can't remember the name of the insurance company, but we used to show up to work in the summer with like cutoffs and T-shirts, and you hear the sounds of ping pong. We used to get hate mail from the insurance company, and they were convinced that we worked for the DEA for some reason. They all thought we were narcs. It was pretty funny. We all got a chuckle out of it. Yes, and let's see, some of the other anecdotes. Yeah, Rich used to throw these lavish parties every year, and at Christmas time, and they were pretty fun. And we would get, like Senator Paul Simon would show up, and always, because he was very political. I think he probably still is to a certain extent. But
yeah, he's still a part of the Cato Institute.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It really was.
No, I can tell in your voice. I can tell in your voice. You're very similar to all the other folks I've talked to, and everyone's really got fond memories of everything. I mean, for me, the story becomes that Rich obviously was able to show that these rules worked, and then as time moved on, I mean, what did your choices become, and what directions did you pursue after the turtle experiment?
After the turtle experience, I thought rather than set up my own fund, and I initially did that when I worked in Ireland, I just couldn't get a client base because commodities trading and fund management, there was only one player in Europe, and that was Larry Height. And he...
I was in Larry's office 3 days ago.
Huh?
I was in Larry's office 3 days ago.
Yeah, Larry was working out of ED&F Mammoth at Summer Reserve. ED&F Man were my brokers for years. Mm-hmm. And but he was he was like the only other person that was doing it. A lot of small IVs were trying to set up funds like that, and I did manage to land a couple of clients like that. At the end of the day, though, because I think it was just too premature in terms of the market, in terms of selling the concept and stuff, I decided just to go back to the United States, and I ended up teaming up with Tom Baldwin, and we set up a company to trade funds, which was a very interesting experience. But Tom's a very interesting man.
Now, do you consider yourself retired today?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
pretty much. I love to travel. I'm fairly well invested in Australia, which is a really nice part of the planet, and I've never really had a chance to explore this part of the world. So it's a nice place for me, and I get to go to really bizarre places and just wonderful. Never too cold in the winter. The summers, they're hot, but they really don't get very humid and stuff. And it's, I've got a really nice house in a really nice part of town. And I've got a lot of friends here that I've met. A lot of my friends actually have emigrated down here over the years.
No, I'm envious. You've been telling me about your travels the last 4 or 5 months of exchanging emails, and every time I'd get a little envious. But let me jump.
Let's see. In the last 2 months, I've been to Auckland, New Zealand. By the way, never go to Auckland; it's a shithole. I've been to Singapore. I've been to Vietnam. I just came back from Fiji. Fiji was really nice. And if you really want to go somewhere, particularly if you have a girlfriend or a significant other of some kind, just definitely Fiji, because they're all private islands and they're just wonderful. And then I'm off to, where am I off to? Oh, I'm off to Indonesia next.
No, that sounds cool. Let me jump back.
I'm divorced.
I was going to say, let me jump back and ask, just, if you could even paint the picture in your memory of when you showed up for the interview. Was it the 3 guys that were there to interview, and just kind of how that unfolded? And just, I hear what you said how you showed up in your attire and everything. How did you know how did you know about the attire and stuff?
Well, I knew enough people that knew Richard Dennis from the days when he was trading on the floor. I also knew of his reputation off and the fact that he made, just a bucket load of money, or what would be conceived as a lot of money in those days. And they kind of knew his quirks. Bill Eckhardt, I think, not quite as much as Richard, but I think I got enough background information on Richard and his habits and, his kind of very laid-back approach that it was... I think I had a good handle, or a reasonably good handle, particularly on the gaming theory side, because I grew up with those Avalon Hill games and playing Risk and everything. So I knew he had a certain level of common ground on that. I knew he played them when he was a teenager as well. So I think that kind of helped, and that definitely broke the ice. Dale Galutri, I think I found, who was his head administrator, was a little bit cold, and I think there was a little animosity because he was never chosen to be a Turtle. And I think deep down he always wanted to be one, although, Richard took very good care of him. Bill Eckhardt, on the other hand, was just more or less ambivalent. He was just kind of along for the ride. He was, I think he just found the whole experience interesting from a psychological point of view, just to look at the different personalities and stuff. Because most of the tests that we took, particularly for the second-year people, had to deal with psychology, measuring our risk adversity, to see whether or not we're just outright gamblers, which wouldn't do, or to see that, or if we're just totally risk adverse, so we would never pull the trigger on a trade. I think Richard found that the people that had the most education, Harvard MBAs and all that, were probably the ones that were most risk adverse. The ones that really didn't want to pull the trigger and stuff. So, and I think it's fair to say that the people that did the best had the least amount of background in trading, particularly commodity. A lot of people traded their own stock accounts and everything, but as far as commodity traders, the only one that came really, really close to Richard's research in terms of trend following was Paul Raybar.
What do you mean?
Raybar had done some...
I said, what do you mean?
Well, in his interview, and this is what Raybar told me, he said that, they were sitting down there and they're talking about the trading methodology, and Raybar had figured out the entrance and exit points for what we call S1 or System 1, and but he figured it out on his own, separately, without even knowing anything about Richard Dennis. The thing that he was hung up on was, how to handle the risk and money management, and he was kind of close in that area, too, which I think is why he was hired.
It's funny. I think one of the ways described the whole atmosphere of everyone in the room, he described it to me as a mini UN. That it was a culturally, politically, sociologically, sexually as diverse group as you could possibly put together.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, it was. Everybody was just in their own place. I mean, like me, Tommy Shanks. Jerzy Svoboda and stuff. We kind of hung out together, and Paul Raybarth to a lesser extent. We got to know each other fairly well and stuff. And, other people, I mean, there were other, I suppose, I wouldn't want to use the word factions, but I mean, there were groups that were a little bit more closely tied to each other, with the possible exception of Jeff Gordon, who spent most of the time sleeping in the office.
Jeff Gordon.
I don't even know what happened. I have no idea whatever happened to Jeff, by the way. Do you?
We spoke to him, yeah. He gave some good insights. I believe he actually ended up leaving the program early over a disagreement with Rich.
Yeah, what happened was Rich offered, there were two tiers. If you traded $1 million, you get 20% of new net profit. Conversely, if you traded only $100,000, and he was flexible like that, although we all took $1 million, if you traded $100,000 or $200,000, you get a much higher percentage return. And he had it figured out on a scale, and we calculated it. It worked out fairly similarly, except having in dollars allowed us to diversify a little bit more and to be a little bit more accurate in terms of our unit size and our risk management. So we thought that was more prudent just to go with the $1 million line with C&D.
I'm curious from your perspective about, really top-notch folks when you were in the program. I've heard from an assortment of folks. I've probably heard more compliments about Jerzy Svoboda and Paul Raybar than in terms of other turtles talking and saying, and just being impressed or admiration for those two. I don't know what your perspective is.
Well, Jerzy sat next to me on the desk. Jerzy, for some reason, loved gambling. I mean, loved being able to figure out ways to beat the house, not gambling in its classic sense. And he would just bugger off for 2 or 3 months at a time. So I was trading his account and my account simultaneously, pretty much for the duration of the Turtle project. Because he was down in Vegas developing, small microsystems that could read cards as they're being, shuffled and dealt at the blackjack table. In fact, he and Tom Shanks were both independently. They started their careers as professional gamblers, using it's obsolete now, but they were using card counting methodologies, running teams, and stuff like that. It was very sophisticated stuff.
Jeff Gordon had made the argument to me that he had determined that the outsiders had better performance than the folks that came from the inside. Do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with Jeff on that, and the reason being is that a lot of the people that he hired had backgrounds in commodity, like Brian Proctor, Jimmy D. Maria. There was another guy,
Sam DiNardo.
I'm sorry?
Sam DiNardo?
Yes, Sam DiNardo was one, and there was another one. He was a gay guy. I can't remember, because he had 2 gay guys with him, but there was, and then the other guy, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I thought about him in years. Brian
Proctor, no.
I don't know.
Hold on. Brian Proctor?
No. No, Brian Proctor was an insider. Sam DiNardo, Jimmy D. They were all insiders, and they didn't really perform that well. And I think that Richard's judgment, there was a certain level of nepotism, as opposed to just being black and white in terms of his selection. So I agree with Jeff. The people that he hired that were just completely outside, of that group before we joined it and stuff, probably did perform better. But we were trained better in the second year as well. We actually had a training manual that was developed, oddly enough, by Jeff Gordon. And that gave us a much better insight. It was a little bit more catch as catch can in the first year, as far as trading was concerned. The second year, when we actually sat down and in a proper classroom that he rented from some hotel, I think it was structured a lot better, and we were able to our learning curve, I think, was actually a lot steeper in terms of getting it right.
Something I might not even think to ask about.
Right. Okay, that brings up a really interesting question, and I actually thought about it all weekend and whether or not to tell you or not. You know that I'm a criminal, right?
Well, I don't know that, but I know it now, I guess. Whatever.
I said was a criminal. In fact, when this is pretty interesting, and I'm debating. I mean, if you publish it, that's fine. But if you do, you have to do it with a disclaimer, because this happened about 25 or more years ago and stuff. But before I worked for Richard Dennis, I was a drug dealer. Did you know that? Did any of my fellow colleagues tell you that? Because Dennis actually was involved in getting me out of trouble.
The only thing, one person, and I should probably save their name because he didn't say it in any kind of negative way, and it was kind of an off-the-record remark, and it was kind of like if you talk to Mike, there was something interesting going on with Mike, but that's all I'm going to tell you. That's all I knew.
All right. Like I said, it has to be followed with a disclaimer, because I'm completely anti-drug, first of all, these days, and have been for 25 years. But when I was, it was probably about 2 or 3 years before I joined Richard Dennis, I used to control about maybe 80% of the drug traffic on the Rush Street, Division Street area. You've been to Chicago, of course, right?
Yeah.
The nightclubs and all that?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I used to control most of the cocaine traffic there as a drug dealer, and I walked away from it when my son was born for a myriad of reasons, but mostly because it was before crack cocaine had taken off. In those days, they called it freebase, and people were starting to freebase and stuff, and I could start to see, like, this kind of this rather scary phenomenon, if you would, of people becoming actually addicted to coke, because theoretically, it's not addictive if you just snort this stuff. So
it was leaving the fun period and going to a more serious period.
I'm sorry?
I said, I guess it was leaving kind of the fun period of coke use and maybe to a more serious, like.
It was, yeah. I mean, at the time, it was incredibly chic to do coke in nightclubs. I mean, this was, we're talking about, let's say, 1978 to 1983, something like that.
Right.
But I was doing I was doing a lot of size, but it was mostly, it was just purely recreational for the most part, and I had a lot of people that worked for me, and I was doing a tremendous amount of size. And then, as I said, I walked away from it when my kid, completely walked away from it. I actually moved, didn't tell anybody where I lived, and pretty much erased everybody's name from my speed dial and everything. And then about a year after I walked away from it, there was a knock on my door, and it was the FBI. God bless them. And by the way, most of this stuff is available on the Freedom of Information Act, probably about 60 or 70% of my file. I was also dealing small arms as well and stuff, which is probably why my whole file is, you won't be able to access it.
I'm going to take your word at it.
Anyway.
I said, I'm going to take your word at it.
You're more than welcome to access my FBI file. In fact, if you do, send me a copy, because I've never seen it. I've seen it when from the FBI's point of view. Anyway, the FBI approached me and said, "You're in a heap of shit," because apparently I've been followed for 2 years and stuff. They've got aerial photographs of me and stuff. It's really spooky, the level of surveillance and stuff. Anyway, they came knocking and stuff and said, "You're going to work for us, boy, or you're going to jail for 115 years, something like that." So I worked undercover for the FBI for into my first year, probably a little bit more than a year working for Richard Dennis. Anyway, I was in court, in federal court, and I was testifying in front of a famous judge on there was a guy there was a sentencing hearing for a guy named, he was one of my suppliers and stuff. And I testified in front of him, but I was still technically working for the FBI. Anyway, fast forward 2 weeks from that point, and Richard and Dale come into the office, and we, just for their weekly or bi-weekly meeting, and Richard says, "I need to talk to you right now." And I'm like, "What?" So, excuse me, we had a little room. By the way, I'm just coming down with a cold. Excuse me. we had this room that was like our lunchroom in the Turtle thing. So I sit down in the room, just me and Dale and Richard and stuff. And Richard reaches into his briefcase and he pulls out a transcript of the trial. He goes, "Now look, I'm not going to fire you if you tell me the truth," because he was kind of like had a very libertarian bent at the time. He goes, "Just tell me the truth. What's going on?" So I gave him the whole story about how I used to be a drug dealer and how I am now working for the FBI. He says, "Uh-huh." He's shaking his head. He goes, "Are you done with them?" I'm like, "I don't know yet." So it turns out that the U.S. attorney was a guy named Gordon became the U.S. attorney for that district of, I think there's like 3 states or something he was in charge of. So he calls up and he goes, explains to him what's going on. So gets in touch with the FBI, and then he calls the 2 guys that were my handlers in the FBI, calls them into his office, and he goes, "Are you guys done with him?" And they were like really nervous because he was very politically powerful in those days.
Absolutely.
He calls them into the room and he says, "Are you guys done with him?" And they're like, "Well, yeah, I think we're pretty much done, blah, blah, blah." And then about 2 weeks after that, I ran into one of them actually accidentally. In fact, he lived in my building. I didn't even know it. And he just looks at me and goes, "I don't know who you know, pal, but you're not being charged with anything, and everything has gone away." So, called it was the U.S. Attorney's Office and asked him a favor, and I was never charged.
Interesting.
So I have no criminal record.
So is that something that was discussed in the Turtle Room? Obviously, the person that mentioned
No, but I'll tell you. But here's a couple of interesting asides. I mean, there were rumors around, obviously, because of that situation.
I think that's what I got, was a rumor.
Here's one of the more bizarre elements of it and stuff. I had the police paid off because there was a lot of corruption in those days. There aren't anymore, thank God. But there was a lot of corruption going around. I mean, so much so that if I was on Rush Street and I was going to go home and stuff, I wouldn't hail a cab. I'd hail a cop. And there was an investigation into police corruption. They wanted me to testify, but I was never subpoenaed, or I never gotten a subpoena, but I was about to get subpoenaed. So I had to leave the country for about 8 weeks. So I went to Japan and South Korea. My brother was a professor of Japanese sociology and political science. So I went to visit him in Japan. Interestingly, because of his connections with the CIA, offered to, there was some safe house like in Monte Carlo he wanted to send me to for like 8 weeks. Pretty funny. Yeah. So anyway, I obviously didn't get subpoenaed and, of course, never testified because you don't want to testify against the police. They carried guns, okay? So, yeah, they were all supportive of it and stuff. It was the guys on the floor. Like, evidently there was a rumor going about that I was a narc or some shit like that. So I got the cold shoulder from, some of the phone clerks and some of the pit guys and stuff. But that only lasted a couple of months.
Yeah. Well, no, that is interesting. I said that's kind of, in some ways, I guess, you probably look back and you just kind of say it's kind of I don't think the word is fun, but it sure as heck gives you an interesting story to tell the kids at some point.
Oh yeah, and my kids are all adults and they all know about it and stuff. But I think Richard actually found it somewhat bizarrely romantic, if you would, because it was at the time. You remember the show Miami Vice?
Yeah.
It was about the time that was on. That kind of romanticized drug dealing to a certain extent and stuff. So, I honestly think that I think Richard actually found it rather amusing.
Well, it's
anyway, I was invited to everybody's party after that.
Well, it's funny. Obviously, Rich has supported legislation to legalize marijuana to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Big fan of NORML. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's also actually currently today on the board of the Reason Foundation, which is the big libertarian group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's always had a libertarian bent and stuff. And before, as I said, back in those days and stuff, it was before the word crack was even used. They just referred to it as freebase. And when that started happening, the whole romantic thing about cocaine, just, the disco drug and all that and stuff, just flew out of the window. It just became a chronic epidemic.
Well, I would obviously love to. I would love to. I
think I've been inhaling too much dust in the move here.
I would love to write about. To the extent that you just told me. I mean, obviously I would only cover it a brief bit, but I think it adds a lot of, from my perspective as an author, it kind of completely continues to add to the notion that you don't have to be a Harvard MBA to do this, and that people with a variety of backgrounds can excel. And I think your story, not unlike a lot of the other stories of folks in your class, completely buttress that.
Can you hold on a second?
Sure.
Hello? Yes. Yes. Oh, that'd be awesome, mate. I'll be here. If you're going to be here before 12, that'll be great. Yeah, no worries, mate. Thanks a lot. All right, bye. Sorry about that. That was the cable guy.
Well, I'm trying to move.
They're the same universally, whether you're in America or whatever. He's supposed to be here between 12 and 5. It's now, 10:15. He called me up. He said he's going to be here in 15 minutes. So.
Well, I'll make sure I let you go in 15 at the latest.
No, don't worry.
But,
I can actually talk and work with the cable guy. He just has to bring me a box. I think stuff's all installed, or it should be in this class.
I'm in the I got to get this one rental house squared away by September 1st for new tenants. So I'm kind of dealing with the same shit,
Oh God, yeah. Isn't it a nightmare?
It is.
I'm just like.
I was so happy about getting more
mundane going to the hardware store. Like I've been to the hardware store like 5 or 10 times, and it's just picking up a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You know what I mean? It's just. Jersey just loves screwing casinos. He just found it the most fascinating thing in the world. And, Jersey, actually, you know what? I think it's conceivably possible. I think he might have had a PhD, but it was from his home country. I think he was Czechoslovakian or something.
Yeah.
But he's one of those guys that jumped the wall during the Cold War and stuff and came to America to better himself. How he ended up as a turtle is a damn mystery to me. I never really asked him about that and stuff, but
I knew that him and Tom Shanks
I'm sorry?
I knew that him and Tom Shanks got hired on the same day, and Shanks actually heard about the interviews from him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense because they were both professional gamblers. Tom Shanks, to give you a perspective on Tom, he had developed a couple of interesting devices to use in casinos. One of them was a watch where the bezel was cut in a bizarre prism form, and if you held it at a certain angle and stuff, you could actually see the cards when they were being shuffled, their sequence. In fact, if you take a deck of cards, 52 playing cards, hold it in front of Tom Shanks and just flip them through, and literally in 1 or 2 seconds, he's almost dead accurate as to the order of the cards and how they lie. The other thing he did was this binary tool that he built, and it was all built on his, the switches were all in his toes. So, the receivers for the binary thing were little heat sensors that went up his legs. So he would be able to, I suppose in theory, play the piano with his toes. He was so accurate at it. It was really comical, both of them and stuff, developing stuff, using micro video technology, which was unheard of at the time, and all this other stuff in order to, just in order to cheat the casinos and stuff. It was actually, a lot of the stuff was pretty brilliant. Some of the stuff was a little bit off the wall, but both of them were well into that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mentioned that Tom and the dingo boot was his thing.
Yep, that's the one, and that's how it worked. It was all toe switches and heat sensors up his legs.
Yeah.
A little microprocessor that was strapped to his back.
You mentioned some guys, and there's a couple guys I've not been able to track down, or at least that I've got no information on. I know the story of Jim Melnick to some degree because Sam DiNardo sat next to him and Sam told us the story. But did you have? I mean, when you were there, did you have interaction with a guy like Jim, or was it?
It's funny. Jim lived like in Cicero or some Berwyn or some western suburb, which is really bizarre. I think he lived upstairs from a grocery store or some shit. I have no idea how he ever became a turtle because he was just so profoundly laid back and stuff, and he was just a rather odd fellow. He was very quiet and stuff. I know we went out and I got pissed a couple times with him, and me and I think maybe Tom, possibly Paul Raybar was there and stuff. And he reminded me of like a truck driver who just like, by magic became a turtle, and he still couldn't believe why or how. Yeah, he was rather a funny character. But as far as where he is today, I have no clue at all.
Yeah, I've been trying. The way he got hired, at least his way Sam described it, is that he decided he had read something on Rich. He wanted to meet him, and he got a security guard job at the CBOT, and every day for several years would just say, "Hello, Mr. Dennis," and eventually that was what got him in.
You're kidding. God, yeah. You know what? That honestly sounds like Jim Melnick. I mean, he would refer to blue jeans as dungarees. I'm like, where is this guy from? Yeah, it was very, very strange. And like I said, he was very quiet. He was very mercurial kind of person and stuff. So nobody really knew a lot about him. But it's interesting that you say that and stuff, because that would definitely suit his personality, him becoming a security guard just so he could meet Richard Dennis.
Yeah, let me ask you, because I don't think I'm going to find time with him. He hasn't had a public comment in, gosh, I don't know how long. I've got some good stories about him and everything, but just your general impressions of being with Paul and everything. I mean, I've got a lot of feedback from folks that were really close with him in the second class, but I'm just curious if you have any perspectives or insights. I mean, he's obviously, for measurement purposes, after the turtle experiment, he's hands down the second most successful behind Jerry. But I'm just curious as to what your feeling might be.
Well, actually, I think of all the turtles and stuff, Paul Raybar and Tom Shanks, the three of us were probably the closest of any of them. And Paul was a concert pianist, number one, and two, he was a medical school dropout. He actually was going to become a doctor, and he's an absolutely wonderful man. The thing is, he is so he's one of the most private people I've ever met. I mean, once you get to know him and stuff, he's fine, but he does not like the limelight at all. He used to live on the West Coast, but he found out that he's actually allergic to sun and prone to skin cancer, which is why he moved to the East Coast. And I mean, if you know him, he's like a regular guy, but if you don't know him, he's really hard to warm up to. But yeah, he's absolutely brilliant. I mean, it's scary just how smart he is, actually.
Well, see, that's the kind of comment that'll end up in the book. I say that's the kind of comment that will end up in the book, though, because that's what a lot of other folks have said. I mean, I respect that. I mean, I think everyone, even all these years later, everyone realizes or looks back and says, anything we really know about Paul's the really private guy, and everyone just basically says he's just brilliant. And to some degree, that's how my little synopsis of him is going, where he's the publicity shy guy, but here's his performance, and let that speak for itself.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing and stuff. And I can't see him ever really having a need to give interviews, or I mean, it's like he's a man with no ego at all. I mean, he just doesn't care. He's like focused on trading, does that, but he also loves he loves playing his music, and there's some other intellectual pursuits that he's in. And like I said, when you know him, all right, he's just fun to be around and all that. I mean, he's very witty and everything. He got along especially well with Liz too. Back in those days, she was Liz Mack, and they were particularly close. In fact, if she wasn't engaged to another guy, I think they would have actually ended up together.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, because their personalities suited each other so well and stuff, and I could tell just by the gleam in his eye when he talked to her that he had kind of a crush on her.
Let me throw one at you. One that I've been kind of pondering. Rich has publicly said, and he said it kind of in a way of like, oh gosh, I hope we came before that. But he was asked in an interview in 2005 whether the movie Trading Places influenced him. And I got to be honest with you, I have a hard time believing, because it did come out about 6 months before he started the first class. In my mind, have a really hard time believing, whether it was consciously or subconsciously, that movie about commodity trading in spring of 1983 did not influence the most successful commodity trader in the city of Chicago on his turtle experiment. I mean, am I completely barking up the wrong?
Let me put it this way, and bluntly, you bet your ass it had a fucking gun. It absolutely did. Whether he denies or not, of course it did. So yes, it was based on Trading Places. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no question in my mind. I never asked them about it. Oh, actually, I did. I think I asked Bill, and he told me about that indeed there was a bet between Bill Eckhardt and Richard Dennis.
So I wish that I could have more of Mike. I wish I could sit down with Mike and talk and talk and talk. And I've got some other tapes that I'm going to go through and listen to of his and see what else I can pull together. But we're lucky to just have that, because that is historical. It's historical to have his perspective and his unique insights. And I'm going to be pulling together some other insights from other turtles and some other trend following traders unrelated to the turtles. I mean, let's face it, the vast majority of my career these days has really become the keeper of the flame of the trend following flame. So it's far more than just, quote, the turtles alone. But I just love that stuff with Mike. I mean, that was just, it brings back memories of putting the book together and putting that whole story together. And it's just timeless. It's timeless. And I think when you hear Mike's words, it lets you know, wow, this was truly the turtle experiment was truly an original. So, but anyways, I want to introduce this next segment, and this is an interview that I've got coming up. That I just did with Jim Byers. And as I mentioned earlier, Jim was a student of mine, and he originally came across my book and then took some training with us. And actually, Jim became my first one-on-one student. So interesting story, just kind of an everyman story that I think you're going to be able to relate to, and I hope you enjoy it. So today on the show, I have an interesting guest. Jim Byers is actually originally came through my world through some of the training at my firm. And to make a long story short, Jim has broken off, and now with another gentleman named Todd Miller, they have gone ahead and started their own trend following fund. And so I think it's going to be interesting to talk to Jim today, because it's not necessarily talking to Salem Abraham or Bill Dunn at their immense success. I will not be surprised if Jim has that kind of ultimate success. But at this stage of the game, it's really nice to talk to somebody who is really just in the process of cranking it up and trying to make something big happen. And look, hey, you got to give everyone props that says, I'm going to get off the couch and I'm going to make something happen. Because I tell you what, there's a lot of people out there that refuse to do that. So Jim, I want to welcome you today.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So where are we calling? You are in Indianapolis today, or?
Yeah, that's correct. In Indianapolis, it's a beautiful day here. We've had this global warming's doing wonderful things for the weather around here. So it's probably as good as California.
There you go. So let me go back with you, because I know, as I mentioned, you were actually the first in-person training that I've had a chance to do. Not first in-person group event, but the first one-on-one. And I know before that you had gone ahead and you had taken some training, some of the home study training through my firm. But let me ask you, where was your first light bulb moment to where, and I'm actually going to even allow you to dig back a little bit further than this, but because I know I'm jumping right into trend following, but I want to know your first light bulb moment about trend following where you kind of first just said, hold on, this exists? And I want to let you answer that first, and then we'll jump back to a little bit about earlier in your life and career. Okay.
Well, So I guess the first thing is to put a little context around. It was about in 2006, I pulled out one of my 401k graphic charts showing my performance over the last few years. And I, like many, took a hit in the .com bust. And I'm looking at this chart and going, wow, really? This is still here, and it's still that far under where it was before the bust? And sort of at that moment, I said, I really got to start learning how to do this on my own. I just don't trust others. It's not working that well. And so I started on a journey, and I just started reading books. And of course,
but Jim, what were you trusting though? Since you brought it up, what were you trusting to begin with? What was the vehicle or the investment strategy that you were trusting?
Yeah, so it was mutual funds and bonds, and you put it into this mix, so many percent of this and so many percent of that, and if you hold it for the long term, it is gonna, you're gonna get so much percent, you'll be able to retire. Here's how much money you're gonna have. It's a beautiful graph that shows how it's gonna look, and yet, that wasn't exactly what I was experiencing.
How long had you been? What's your age today, Jim?
I'm 50.
You're 50. So how long had you been actively investing in some form or another, whether it's mutual funds or not, when you had that revelation of like, hey, this is not what I signed up for?
Oh, wow. So I started in 1984, started down the mutual fund bond path. So a long time. What was that? 22 years?
Wow. So I guess, that's that, starting in 84, 85, there was some nice run-ups there. And obviously mutual funds cared for people very well in the 90s. And so, but it was literally kind of almost midlife where you're like, hold on, this is just, I might go another 30, 40, 50 years on this planet. And what I'm currently doing is not cutting it.
Exactly. And in 2006 when I started looking into this too was, there's a lot of people starting to flip houses. There was all that sort of euphoria going on again, and it was just striking me, wow, this is starting to smell like this .com era again, and I just didn't feel comfortable with it all.
So you're at that point, but when you say you don't feel comfortable, so help me out though, because this is as a man who's at 50 years of age, and I know you're younger at that point where you made that revelation, but this was standard operating procedure. There's a lot of big brokerage firms telling everyone this is it. This is what you do. Like, why did you feel like there was possibly another direction? What was triggering that?
Again, first thing was looking at those charts and just saying, really, I've taken that much of a hit. It's gone nowhere. And then looking at the charts where they're promising, 7-8% returns, and I'm sitting back thinking, okay, it's been 5 years, 6 years here, and I'm actually down. What is this going to look like in the future? And everybody was sort of saying the same thing. And I kind of look around and thinking, how do you really make money doing this if you're doing exactly the same thing that everybody else is doing? It doesn't seem to make sense to me. So I was looking for, a way to do it myself, a way to be in control. Really, I at the end of the day, I sort of trust myself more than other people, and the guys that I was talking to, really, they're salespeople. As I more and more I dug into it.
When you said the guys you're talking to, who do you mean?
Well, at the time it was Merrill Lynch.
Okay, so they were just talking Merrill Lynch brokers.
Right. Right. And, of course, you're watching TV, you're reading the newspapers, all those things that, a normal person does. And it's all the same stuff, right?
So it's very, very fundamentally driven thinking at this moment.
Very fundamentally driven and very much, you buy it, let it run. You never try to time the market or any of that stuff. That's all evil.
Let me ask about Merrill Lynch, though. You mentioned Merrill Lynch. That was your broker. You're living in Indianapolis, and so you go to their offices and talk to them.
Yeah, in fact, it was interesting because the way my company had arranged it was that they allowed Merrill Lynch to actually talk to employees, and so Merrill came in and
what year, Jim? What year are we talking? Just making sure everybody follows us. What year are we talking?
Oh, this is again probably around 2006 or so.
Okay. Okay.
And I had conversations. Actually, I should probably say that's probably earlier than that. Sorry, with Merrill Lynch, early 2000s.
Okay. And so, your company, and you're at Eli Lilly, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay,
yes.
So they bring Merrill in, and so is it employees coming into a room and Merrill is telling you what? What are they, in this 2006 time period? What are they saying?
Oh, they're saying diversify. Diversification is your ticket. You're going to have to get out. Make sure you don't have all your assets in Lilly stock, because after that point you had Enron and WorldCom and others that had failed. So it was a very big push to say, boy, diversification is the answer. Here we can put you in these mutual funds. We're going to have a mixture of bonds and stocks and and here's what this is going to look like for you. So it was a well packaged story. Beautiful graphics. It was in a nice binder. It was all that sort of stuff.
Did you have any reason to doubt any of this at that moment?
Well, I did. I mean, at that time, again, I was starting to get very skeptical at this point. So I'm starting to get to the point of looking at Enron, looking at WorldCom, and I'd watched enough and read enough where people were like, oh, these are all the top dog companies, and these are great companies. And, I had seen enough mutual fund sheets to see that these guys were invested in those companies, and yet they went down. They went to zero. And so I was starting to doubt that, do these people really know what they're doing? And then the other piece of it is really they were picking other people to invest the money. They weren't actually investing the money themselves. So I was a step removed, and again, it's what's on the other side of that? I don't know.
Interesting. So what was let me ask you a personal impression. So was it brokers in nice suits and all the answers? Who are the people that were approaching describe that the playing? I'm not even in this world, so I don't know. I don't know what world I'm in. I have to hear what it's. In this world, I have to hear what it's like on that side of the moon. I don't know, so yeah. I have to be described to in very simple terms.
Yeah, so it was very interesting because my first meeting with them was I'm around a round table, very nice table at Lilly, and there's three people, and they're all in nice suits, and they're wearing their nice shoes, nice ties, nice everything, carrying nice briefcases and everything. And they pull out the nice selling brochures, and they lay those out, and they sell to you, and they're telling you how easy this can be. Put your money with them, trust them, and 15 years or so, look at this, look at these numbers. Here's what this chart looks like, and they're colored charts. They look great. They catch your eye, and and frankly, it really is a sales job, and at the same time, it's they're trying to connect. They're trying to connect with your wants and your desires. So they're asking you questions about what do you want, what are your desires, where do you want to go, where do you want to be, and that kind of stuff. And then they pull out the brochure and they have the answer already.
Okay, so you've gone through this whole process. You're seeing it. You're getting skeptical. So where did the light bulb? Where did the aha happen for trend following exists? Where did that start?
Yeah, so the bridge.
By the way, just so people know, I don't know the answer to this, so I don't know what Jim's going to. I don't know what Jim's going to say, so I don't know the answer to this question.
Yeah, so again, I was saying I was reading a ton of books, and at that time it was a lot of fundamental Warren Buffett kinds of stuff, and then I came across a book called Rule Number 1 by Phil Town, and it was based on fundamentals, but at the end of that book, it started talking about indicators and charts and talking about the big guys getting in and the big guys getting out. And you could see their volume. You could see them making their move. You could see that breakout in the charts. And he had a way of making that determination of a breakout and saying, if all the fundamentals are in your favor, then look at the charts. And when the chart says go, it's like a green light on a at a stoplight. It's like a green light when you go, and then if it breaks down below, then it's like a stoplight and you stop. It's as simple as that. You just have to do it and get out of the stock if it's not acting favorably. And I looked at that and I thought, now that makes sense. That I can control. Everything else is sort of a wish and a hope, and looking at fundamentals, and I'm not sure I'm talented enough to look at all those fundamentals, or I wasn't talented enough to look at all those fundamentals, and that made sense. So that's what really started catching my eye about trends, that notion of a trend. So then I started looking for books with trends in there. I came across another one called Shark Investing. And they had their 10 commandments of investing in there, and that had some great things in there about preserving your capital and watching the charts and everything. And I thought, this is pretty good. I like this. This fits me. So then I said, I got to go find books looking at this trend. And I walk into a Borders, and I'm scanning the bookshelves, and there's this book with a black side to it, about an inch wide, and it says trend following. And I thought, this is pretty interesting.
Paid product announcement. No, I'm actually not paid.
Exactly. So I looked at that book, and I pull it up, and I look at this book, and I said, wow, it's, kind of thick and all that. And I'm scanning through it and everything, and I look towards the back, and it has all these performance tables in it. And I thought, well, this is differently. Nobody talks about performance in their books. And, it just really struck me. It's like, this is really different. Everybody just says, buy low, sell high, or follow the charts, or do this head and shoulders pattern, or whatever. But nobody's talking about it being replicable. So I'm looking across, and I'm seeing these charts, and I said, one after another, and said, oh my God, this is incredible. So I buy this book, and I sit down, and frankly, I kind of read it from the back and then went to the front, because I was really mesmerized by the performance tables.
Well, we have something in common. That was what started me too. Those performance tables were the proof,
They were the proof. And so as I'm digging into that, I'm looking at, the things that struck me was, it was mathematical, it was repeatable, the correlation. I was looking at the timing, the chart on timing of when to enter, when to exit, and just the examples that were there, and I was just mesmerized by that, and I thought, this looks interesting. But again, at that point, I was, part of me was very interested, but the other part was very skeptical too. It's like, okay, can it be this easy? Can this really be replicated? What's behind this? So I read the front of the book, and then I start hearing about characters like Bill Dunn and J.W. Henry, and real people, really out there, and then that sort of tied the back end, the performance tables of the book together for me, and really got me interested.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting sometimes to hear people talk about it, because even though I wrote the book, very similar ways for myself, because I was looking through this data at one point in time, and I was looking through I think it was called the Stark Report back in the early to mid 90s. And they would list all this performance data in these obscure manuals that you had to pay a couple $1,000s a year to subscribe to, but then the thing that I found that was really interesting, and one of the reasons, and I didn't ask for permission, because maybe this admission will, I don't know, maybe somebody from some agency where they wear black suits and glasses will show up at my door in the next 20 minutes to click on me and cuff me away. But the reason I put those performance tables in there is because they were on file with the government. And I was like, well, gosh, if these are public records, then let's put this stuff in a book and let other people see it. So that was just as kind of to add to what you're talking about. That was my rationale to putting them in there, beyond all the reasons you brought up too, which was they were so damn educational.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it is. I don't know how to say it other than just say that was a big exclamation mark on me making that turn and saying, yeah, trend following's it, is because there's performance, there's proof. You say that all the time. There's proof. These guys are out there, and it just means a lot when you're sitting here and at this time I'm managing my own money. It's my own 401k. It's my own money that I've saved. I wanted to protect that. I wanted to do the right thing. I didn't want to go out there and, buy lottery tickets or throw it into go gamble it away. I wanted to make sure I could grow that and grow that for my family.
So you make this process of some of these aha moments that are happening with some of the books you're talking about. By the way, I met Phil Towns, sat next to him at a conference last summer. Really, really interesting, nice guy. Him and his wife, really good people. I've not read his books, but he was a really cool guy. But so you're having this aha moment with trend following, and so lead me through your next steps. And what year are we at when this is happening?
This is. Wow, this is probably 2008 at this point. So I probably put 2 years of studying, reading, and then starting to come upon trend following around 2008.
Okay, so would this have been before the crash in the fall or after?
Oh yeah, this is before. Sorry, yeah.
Okay.
This is probably 2007 was when I started because I got a hold of. I remember this very distinctly. I get a hold of Phil Towns' book, and it made, like I said, it made a lot of sense to me. And as the market started going down, I remember I was watching CNBC at the time, and Phil Town is on CNBC, and he's talking to Maria Bartiromo and some other guy. I can't remember his name. And it's a great one on YouTube. If you ever get it, go out there and look at it. It's about 2007, about August of 2007. And And so he's talking about, hey, we love this time. This is a great time. The market's going down. So for little guys like us, we just get out. We get out of the market and we wait for things and wait for the institutions to start buying. And again, that was one of those things that goes, man, that makes a lot of sense to me. Get out, protect your downside. And Maria Bartiromo, I remember she says, get out, Phil. You just can't get out. That's crazy. You just can't do that. And the other guy gets on and he's starting to say, hey, if you can time the market and blah blah blah. And really, I mean, they jumped on him, and it was very interesting to watch. And sure enough, the market tanks. And they had said at the end of that, they said, when you find out when the bottom is, when you can call the bottom, then call us and tell us when the bottom's going to be. So about March or so of 2009 or February of 2009, he sends out to his group, hey, guys, put your money back in. I think this is a good time to put your money back in. And it was pretty close to the market bottom. So it was just an interesting one to watch. They came in, they licked their wound. Maria Bartiromo wouldn't even ask them a question after that. And it was really amazing to watch that on CNBC. Yeah,
it's funny. I've had a little bit of experience with those folks at CNBC, and I've posted an infamous voicemail that Maria Bartiromo left for me. But I don't have. But, I think sometimes people think, well, I've got some huge negative vibe or anything. No, I don't. Honestly, I'm nonplussed. I don't care. I mean, I can be passionate and whatnot, but I don't care, because at the end of the day, everyone needs to understand what a CNBC is. It is a process. It is a system put together by a corporation with actors to generate ad revenue. Now, yes, somebody could say, well, Mike Covel, you're trying to generate revenue too. You know what? Absolutely I am. I'm a capitalist. Okay. Here I'm giving people education, information, research, and they can give me capital in exchange for the transaction. And that's the deal. However, I'm not trying to, and this is where I think people lose track of what CNBC is. It's this programmed thing to force you to watch every day. But I think sometimes we get caught up in the personalities. Personalities are replaceable. I mean, they can invent a new name for Maria Bartiromo tomorrow and prop her in there, and that person would take over, and the machine would keep on going. So it's just a machine. There's no emotion to it. It is what it is. I just think sometimes we all forget what it is.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. And, it is like, I think you said, it's entertainment, and it really is. You got to take it for what it's worth. I personally, to this day, I don't know when it was probably, it was after the crash. So it was probably about 2009, January of 2009 or so. I remember just saying, I'll turn it on to look at price quotes, but I don't want the noise anymore. So I never listen to the volume on CNBC anymore. It's always just looking at price quotes.
I don't want to go too far into as I kind of switch gears a little bit on you, I don't want to go too far into your new firm, your new trend following firm. I know you guys are, you've got about a year track record under your belt. You're getting rolling, but I kind of would like for you as we kind of wind up, to really help as somebody who's really new to this in the last 4 or 5 years. And you've mentioned some of these big picture issues, but now that you're into working with a partner and working on helping other people to make money beyond your own account, helping other people to make trend following profits, what are some of the more complicated? I don't know, complicated is not the right word. What are some of the more pertinent issues and understandings and lessons that you've really picked up that now that you and Todd are working together? What are some of those things that have really, you've had your initial light bulb moments, but now we're kind of even getting the more in-depth light bulb moments. What can you illuminate for me, Jim?
Wow, there's so much here. I think it's really interesting to talk to clients because it sort of provides a mirror back on what you're thinking and what you're doing and how people are digesting that. One of the things that
I'll tell you what, you mentioned that. Do you have any like really good, interesting examples of either somebody that you were talking to that immediately got it, or somebody that you walked away from, or they walked away from you, or like there was no match?
Oh, absolutely. So I remember sitting down and talking to a lady, and we're walking through the slides that we have and talking about, we're not trying to predict the market. We're following the market. We don't think we're smart enough to predict the market. I portray, all the things that are going on in the world, all the government intervention, all the things going on in the Middle East, the oil, just you name it, China, whatever. There's so many things going on out there. How can anybody predict the future? And, just talking through that and saying, that's why we're following. And then really the thing that I think makes a lot of sense, and I hope others are too, is around the built-in error rate, is what I call it. As you start testing the system, you get a sense of what the error rate is going to be, and generally is 35 to 40% error. You're not making profits on those, or not error. You're at 65% error. You're 35% right, and I find that very attractive. The fact that I don't have to be right all the time to make money. If somebody told me I went into college and they said, hey, if you get a 35% on this test, you're going to get an A, I would say, whoa, that's now you're talking, that's awesome. So I really like the built-in error rate. And this one person I talked to, she heard that and she said, for the first time, this makes sense. I don't think you can be smarter than the market. And she goes, I really like what you're saying, and signed up and joined us as a client.
it's weird. You mentioned error rate or win-loss percentage. People can call it different things. And I think in my place in my life, I sometimes forget, or I don't pay attention, or I tune out one of the favorite market hoaxes that exist. And that would be somebody comes along and they say, well, here's a trading approach. And, you can win 95% of the time. And it's like I said, sometimes I have to kind of refocus on that and realize just get people to understand how absurd that is. You can win 95% of the time. You can lose everything on the other 5%.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly.
But we get caught up in this win percent idea, and you're kind of making the case for the lose percent can be as inspirational, motivating, and confidence building as focusing on the winning percentage. And you make the point of hey, it doesn't have to be a high win percent.
Right. It's powerful. I think it's a very powerful reason to trade in this way.
Yeah. Well, listen, Jim, I'm gonna let you run because I want to catch up with you a little bit further down the road, and I know I'm going to talk to Todd as well. But I want to catch up with you guys, let you guys get a little bit further down the road, and come back and talk about how the business is unfolding, some more experiences. But I think it's really interesting, and I've got a lot of different guests coming up, and the way I view the show here is I think everyone at their particular point or place has an interesting story to tell. And I think people are going to find that your story today was interesting. It's always someone's going to relate to what you said. They're going to kind of go, oh, I get it. I've been through that. I was there. I'm him. I see that. I can relate to it. Somebody might hear me and they might go, I don't know what this guy's talking about. He's talking about dinosaurs and T-Rexes. He sounds like he's a mental patient. I don't really want to listen to him. But this guy, Jim Byers, he sounds more interesting than the mental patient Covel. So it takes, it's different strokes, different folks. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Well, good. Well, I'm glad I could help, and anything I can do to help, obviously, please feel free to call, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you for the honor to be here.
Thank you, Jim. We'll talk soon again.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.